Well, good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome in from truly across the continent today for another very exciting Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants broadcast. A big thank you, especially to our Mason Creek Elementary folks. We've got like 4 classes from there involved. So, Georgia, it's so nice to have you in today and such a thrill to have you all. For those who are new to us, which many of you are today, we are all about bringing conservation, adventure, and science into classrooms around the world. And it's such a thrill to get to highlight the coolest scientists and explorers on planet Earth. If you're new to us too, everything we do goes to our YouTube channel. So you can tune into programs like 10 years old. You can watch this one in 3 weeks or 3 years down the road. Lots of opportunity to keep the learning going. Now, October was our Epic Space Month. We did like 9 programs with NASA, Canadian Space Agency, engineers, and more. We've had astronauts on. It's been just a wild ride featuring people that are working to explore the cosmos beyond our planet. But I'm so thrilled that we're extending that into November. In fact, this is our last space program for quite a while with Dr. Caitlin Crawford, one of my very favorite people we ever bring on the show. Now, she works on powering spacecraft through the solar system. She gets to work on building robots to go explore other worlds. And if there's a cooler job than that, I don't know what it is. That's why it's so fun having her on. And so joining us today, live in California, she gets to work at NASA's fabled Jet Propulsion Laboratory. Dr. Caitlin, welcome back to the program, and so nice to see you again.
Thank you guys so much for having me. I'm so excited.
It is such a wild ride every time we get the chance to chat with you, and thank you for being the capstone to our epic month and a half of space. We couldn't contain it. There was too much enthusiasm, and so I'm going to leave you to it to dive in and get us underway. I know you've got a lot to share, so if you want to bring up the presentation and dive in, let's do this thing.
That sounds great. It's an honor to be the last. I'm excited.
Yes. For our classes, while Caitlin's getting this all queued up too, Abby Freeman came on and talked about Mars. We had Ravi Prakash talking about Europa Clipper. It's like the golden age of space exploration right now. So you, every time we get the chance to feature these stories live from the people that are working them, it is really, really special. Caitlin, you're good to go. This looks beautiful. So I'll dip off and take us away.
Sounds great. Okay. Thank you guys so much. So Jesse, what a lovely introduction. It's always an honor to be here, and I'm so excited to talk to you guys today about the spacecraft I get to work on and what I do at NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory out here in Pasadena, California. So first off, we'll just do a little bit about me. We'll get into spacecraft power, the missions that I work on now, and then ultimately my journey in STEM and how I got to be where I am today. This is me. I'm pretty short, so I'm on my tiptoes at a museum trying to be an astronaut, but we'll get there one day. Maybe I'll grow. Okay, so I grew up in a really small town in Virginia. Oh, we want to make this thing go away. Stand by. I received my doctorate in material science at the Colorado School of Mines out in Golden, Colorado, where I moved from Virginia to Colorado. And then I was researching deep space power, and particularly the materials that help make that possible at NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory out here in Pasadena, California. Ultimately, I became a flight systems engineer, still at NASA, which is where I am today. So we're going to be going over a little bit about spacecraft power and what I did back then. Okay, so what exactly is it that I do in STEM? So my degree is in material science, and I love material science because I think it's the perfect blend of physics and engineering and math and all of these cool, interesting studies in STEM condensed and distilled down into one really awesome subject that is material science. So material science, as you can imagine, is the study of materials. And in solid materials, solids are built up of a network of repeating systems, of a bunch of different atoms in a line. And we can think about this like Legos. So if each of these individual things are representing atoms, they're like our Legos of our world. We build up systems and solids, and we as material scientists get to figure out what's the most useful Lego to build a Lego set, aka our world. So everybody has a cell phone, or we've all seen a cell phone. Let's take my cell phone, for example. The front of your cell phone is made out of glass, which is what we call an amorphous material. So it's sort of doing all sorts of things. It has like not a lot of structure or uniformity to the materials on the atomistic level. But the back of the cell phone is metal. And so we can think of these as the Legos that we mentioned, where everything has order and there are repeating units. Now, when engineers go to design devices like this, they turn to material scientists and they say, hey, like I need this thing to be able to do this type of thing. What material should I use? Right? So we said that the front of my phone is glass and the back of my phone is metal. But it's interesting because why did we pick those things to be that way? Well, the front of your phone has to be what we call optically transparent, which is sort of a fancy word to just say, like, we have to be able to see through it, much like a window pane or a glass. But when we do that, when we make things optically transparent, oftentimes that's a trade-off for how fragile it is. So if I drop my cell phone, and we can see my dog is on the back of my cell phone, if I drop it, then it shatters. And that's because it's fragile. But that's the trade-off that we do, this balance of what do we need and what can we live with? So in our case of the front of the cell phone, we need it to be optically transparent, but we sort of live with the fact that it's fragile and could break. But this is this balancing act that we do as material scientists. So we play this game for every material when designing literally anything. So whether that be a Nintendo Switch or hiking poles or a car or your house or even the spacecraft on the surface of Mars, we have to decide what materials go where for these individual designs. So personally, I was a material scientist for space technology. So on the left-hand side here is the actual Mars Perseverance rover that, as of right now, is on the surface of Mars. So it was being built up at NASA's Jet Propulsion laboratory in its high bay. So I was able to go and see it and take pictures of it, which was really amazing. And this is me. And I work on something called RTGs, or radioisotope thermoelectric generators, which is a big mouthful, fancy name for just the way that we power our spacecraft on the surface of Mars, including this Martian rover. So that's what this big fin structure is here in the back. That's our RTG. And this is the way that we supply power to the spacecraft when we are on the surface of Mars. So what's the point? Well, I'm a material scientist. They have this thing on the back of the Mars rover, but where do I fit in all of this? So this is the actual photo taken on Mars from this rover right here, Perseverance, that was being built up in our high bay. This is our RTG, or our power source. And inside of our power source, there's this thing called a thermocouple. These thermocouples are made up of a certain type of material that allow us to convert heat into electricity. So the RTG itself is a little bit complicated, but it's basically radiating out heat, and these special types of materials catch and capture that heat and convert that heat into electricity. So it's really cool because it allows us to power spacecraft in power difficult situations, like the surface of Mars, right? There's no outlets that we have on the surface of Mars to charge something. So this is where I'm going to pause, and I'm going to hand over the screen share to Jesse because he's loaded up the video for me. Jesse, I'm going to stop sharing if that's okay for you.
Perfect. Yes, I'm actually good. You're okay to keep your sharing, and I'll bring up our video here du jour, and we'll play this together. So we've got two videos for you folks over the course of the broadcast. Unfortunately, things are a little bit weird with our tech today, so we're going to highlight this, bring it up, and take you on a little journey of radioisotope power and RTGs. So let's cue this up. And Caitlin, if you need to stop.
If you want to drive a rover on Mars, you have to keep in mind, there's no gas station for millions of miles, and there's no outlet to plug into for power. That's why NASA's Curiosity rover on Mars and other NASA spacecraft that explore the solar system use something called radioisotope power. A radioactive substance releases heat as it breaks down or decays. The system that converts that heat into electricity is called a radioisotope power system. These systems get fancy names. Curiosity's power system is called the MMRTG, Multi-Mission Radioisotope Thermoelectric Generator. MMRTGs are reliable and last a long time. NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory is working with the Department of Energy on ways to make them even more powerful and capable. So researchers want to make the next generation of radioisotope power systems, the eMMRTG. The E stands for enhanced. The new thermoelectric technology in development is based upon materials called scutter rudites. They are part of a family of compounds with many heavy atoms and complex structures. Scuderites conduct electricity like a metal, but insulate against heat the way glass does. At the same time, they can generate sizable electrical voltages, just what engineers need to convert heat into electricity. Engineers use this material in devices called thermocouples, which are used to generate electricity. One of the thermocouple shoes is hot and one is cold. This heat, transferred across a big temperature difference, makes electrical charges flow from the hot shoe to the cold shoe and produces an electrical voltage, and this generates useful electrical power. If these materials were put in the same kind of generator that's on the Curiosity rover with some small tweaks, the generator could be up to 25% more efficient. After 17 years, a spacecraft could have 50% more power than with the current design. That means a spacecraft with an EMMRTG could fly longer and do more science during its lifetime. This kind of research could help us on Earth too. For example, some of the heat that gets wasted when you drive your car could be reused and put back into the car to charge the battery or power electronics. JPL is collaborating with leading U.S. material scientists to design and study even more advanced, high-temperature thermoelectric materials. So next time you need to replace your car battery, think about how NASA spacecraft can't replace their batteries. But as we improve radioisotope power systems, they can go for longer and longer, powered by heat, even in the cold expanse of space.
All right. Thank you so much, Jessie. Okay, great. So, like Saba, which was one of my coworkers in that video, mentioned, that if we have more efficient materials, we can actually have more efficient spacecraft on the surface of Mars or wherever we send our next spacecraft. So we're really excited about advances in material science. So RTGs have been used in NASA for over 50 years. Some of my favorite missions with RTGs are actually the Apollo missions that went to the moon. So you can see one of the astronauts with an RTG right here. We sent a RTG and took a picture of the Pluto from our New Horizons mission, our beloved Pluto. And then my personal favorite are Voyager 1 and Voyager 2, which are well past the heliopause in our solar system. So we're really excited that those missions have been going for such a long time. But there are other options to power spacecraft as well. So it's not just RTGs that we have. We can also do things like solar panels. So we have had some Mars spacecraft powered by solar panels, but the difficulties can be with some solar panels that it's dusty on the surface of Mars. Solar panels work by collecting the rays of the sun and harnessing that energy to convert that into electricity. But if it's dusty and your panels get dirty, then there's nobody there to wipe them off. So it can be a little bit challenging at times, but it is a good alternative. So that's spacecraft power. Now let's talk about the missions that I work on now, which I'm really excited about. Okay, so this mission is called NISAR. NISAR stands for NASA ISRO Synthetic Aperture Radar, which is an Earth observing satellite that launches sometime next year, actually out of India. And we're very excited about it. And it should be able to track topological changes of the Earth down to a couple of centimeters. So we're really cool. It has this really big radar and reflector on the instrument. This thing right here is what we call the reflector. That's sort of a mesh that the spacecraft will send a signal down to Earth, and the reflection of it bounces back up and gets captured by our reflector, and then we can use that to discern what's happening on the surface of Earth from the orbit in space, which is crazy. And this spacecraft is actually powered by solar panels. So we're not using an RTG in this case. We are using solar panels, which is a really good option for us here in this one. Now, while that one is getting ready for launch, I have been spending the last about 10 months working on the Europa Clipper mission. So Europa Clipper is this big orbiter that we sent to Jupiter's moon Europa to detect if there are signs of life that could be possible on this icy moon. So in the bottom left-hand side, these are actually the solar panels that are deployed on that spacecraft that when we get to Jupiter and continuously will be helping supply power to that spacecraft to allow us to do investigations. And we're really excited because this moon on Jupiter is amazing. We believe that there's this icy crust, and underneath the icy crust is a liquid ocean that we hope to detect signs of possible life in our solar system and understand the chemical composition of that icy world to see what can that tell us about how our solar system was formed and about the universe. So our spacecraft actually launched last month. We're really excited about it. It's doing well, and it has to travel over 1.8 billion miles to get to Jupiter on the current trajectory that we're at. So we have another video queued up, and this is going to be a launch highlight. So we launched on October 14th, almost exactly 1 month ago, and it was truly amazing. So I'll let Jesse cue that one up for us now.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Caitlin. And let's dive in with a little bit of a
live at NASA's Kennedy Space Center for NASA's Europa Clipper mission, a nearly 2 billion mile, 5.5-year journey to Jupiter's icy ocean moon.
And liftoff. Liftoff. The Falcon Heavy with Europa Clipper, unveiling the mysteries of an enormous ocean lurking beneath the icy crust of Jupiter's moon, Europa.
Side booster separation confirmed.
Bearing is separated, and those will be recovered by SpaceX's own recovery ship, Go Cosmos.
This is a big moment for the program, for NASA, APL, and JPL. Let's watch.
Europa Clipper, separation confirmed.
And there you go. NASA's Europa Clipper probe, embarking on a long-awaited mission to study Jupiter's icy moon, Europa. And what a sight.
Now they wait for acquisition of signal.
I believe we have it. There it is. Confirmation of signal from the spacecraft, Europa Clipper.
I know. All right. Okay. So as it mentioned, it'll take us a little under 6 years to get there. It was an absolute honor and a dream. I got to be in mission control the day that we launched. So this is me and my coworker. We're getting ready for launch and handing it over to the rest of our team. What we do now is something called DDM, or data and downlink management. So we get to control what data is being sent from the spacecraft in space down to us, the engineers, to decide, is the spacecraft okay? What is she trying to tell us up there? And this is the actual spacecraft as we saw it separate away from that fairing in starting its journey out into outer space. And we're so excited, we can't wait. And these things right here, that top, these are our solar panels. So those big solar panels that we saw before that are going to power this spacecraft, they're all sort of confurled up, and then they deploy to these beautiful things that allow us to harness the energy of the sun to power Europa Clipper all the way to Jupiter. We're very excited. So that's what I get to do on a day-to-day basis, and it's really exciting and amazing, and it's truly an honor to work at JPL. But how did I get to where I am now? Okay, so as I mentioned, I grew up in a small town in Virginia. It was Winchester, Virginia. We were most famous for our apple orchards and the Appalachian Trail. So those tuning in from Georgia, if you happen to be able to get to go to the AT Trail, it's beautiful hiking, especially down there in Georgia. At which point I was accepted into the University of Virginia in 2011, which I intended to major in fine art, actually, not anything to do with engineering, with a minor in chemistry. But ultimately, I decided that I really loved aerospace, and I will live and die on the hill that art and aerospace engineering are very similar if you give them the chance. So It's really, truly a dream come true to switch. And then I graduated in 2015 with my bachelor's in aerospace engineering, and I was able to do a bunch of really cool things when I was at UVA, like meet astronauts and learn about flight vehicles and present on research and go to NASA Langley out in NASA, Virginia. But then I ultimately left to get my doctorate in 2015, where I graduated in 2021 in material science. But I was back and forth between JPL and Colorado. And ultimately, I got hired as a flight systems engineer, which is what I do now at NASA's Jet Propulsion Lab for both the NISAR mission and the Europa Clipper mission. So it's really beautiful out here. And we have these gorgeous mountains, and our campus is lovely. And it's just truly a magical place to be and work. But some of the things that I want to impart is that my journey was nonlinear, and there's a lot of failure. I failed a lot. I'm pretty sure I failed general chemistry in my first year of college, but it's okay to fail sometimes and pick yourself up and keep going. And that's how we learn and grow. And also, you don't have to be stuck behind a microscope to be a scientist. I think the scientists and engineers are some of the coolest people that I know. Also, you might hear my dog in the background squeaking. And you are your biggest advocate. But there are mentors and people like your teachers there with you today that will help find your path and help shape the rest of your life. And these people are priceless. So I've had a lot of really great mentors along the way, like people at UVA or in Colorado and JPL, and I wouldn't be here without them today. So it's really, really great to find those types of people. And then like I said, you don't have to be stuck behind a microscope to be a scientist. So I travel a lot, and I still draw, and I do a lot of art and photography. And I love talking with all of you and being outside in nature. So I hope that if anything you take away, that you can do really awesome science stuff and do really non-awesome science stuff too. You don't have to fit inside of one box. So that's it. That's all for my presentation.
Caitlin, thank you so much for that. Always such a pleasure. Honestly, it's such cool science meeting you, and I love the personal element at the end. And you're the first dog toy addition to a program we've had in literally years. So thank you for that very, very much. We're going to dive in with an awesome Q&A. So we've got our Pasadena crew. We've got all our Georgia classes. Miss Pascal's class. You guys got the camera and video working, which is awesome. So we can come to you live in just a second. But please do. Our other Georgia groups, please feel free to share in the StreamYard chat. And then we've got a bevy of you on YouTube. Everything from grade 12 physics in Brampton. We've got our Hamilton crew. So the more questions, the merrier. And we are going to get underway momentarily. So Dr. Caitlin, to begin, is there a favorite part of your job? We get this question all the time. Is there something morning of all the things you get to do, specific within the science or anything else that you want to share with us?
I think one of my favorite parts is JPL is such a unique and diverse place. And there's so many amazing people. And part of my job is to just go talk to a bunch of scientists and a bunch of engineers that I know nothing about what they do, and I have to sort of figure it out. And so on my day-to-day, I get to meet so many fun people and talk about such incredible science that I wouldn't trade that for the world.
Yeah. One of the things I love highlighting about science in general, whether you're in as engineering, if you're a deep sea biologist, is that you get to work with the coolest people on planet Earth, and you usually get to go to really neat places to work with them, which is very, very cool because your educational journey was long. We've got kids in grade 3, 4 today, and the idea of like 9 more years of school and then an undergrad and then maybe a master's, then the doctorate. It's like, it's overwhelming to think of that much school, but school after grade 12 becomes more like play for quite a bit of it. And at the end of it, you're really young, and you end up with one of the coolest jobs in the world with the coolest people. So it's not for everybody, but if it is for you, don't be discouraged because there's a lot of cool stuff down the road to come. Miss Pascal's class, we're going to head to you guys. If you want to unmute your mic, Mason Creek Elementary, we can come and say hello and check in Georgia. Hi, guys. Welcome in.
Hi, guys.
Hello. Oh, you got the devices on. So you're going to be epically echoey if you keep the second device on, but we can try and play with it. And what you can all do is share in the private chat. So I've put a quick hi there for all our classes in Georgia. Green Acres Academy, if you want to come to you or certain things out in Miss Pascal's class, we can. So let me know in Pasadena. Ditto our YouTube groups. But we have had a question, Caitlin, about why it takes so long to get to Europa. So 6 years seems like a very long time. What?
Yeah. Okay, it's a great question. There's an easy answer, and the easy answer is that it's really far away. Like, we wish it was not so far away, but when we launch our spacecraft, it has a certain amount of force or power that is getting it to speed to get it to where it needs to be. Much like when you're in a car, you're at a certain speed. So we have some set speed that we can be at based off of our rocket and our trajectory. And then we just have to travel really, really far. So unfortunately, it's not just a simple turn down the road. And as a result, it'll take about 5.5 years. Like I said, it's 1.8 billion miles.
And I want to put this in context for our kids too, because to go to the moon, which seems pretty far away, is 2 to 3 days. Mars is like 5 to 8 months, and Jupiter is 6 years. And the spacecraft is going several times faster than a bullet. So like you're shooting with a rifle, the spacecraft is probably going triple that or something like that. Like it's absurd how much faster it's going. And even at that level, it's a long, long time.
It's a long time.
Miss Pascal's class, I'm going to check in with you, and if the other device is muted, we should hear you fine. No. Okay. Okay. So share in the chat. It's so nice to have you guys in. Anyway, and a big welcome. Miss Norman's class, same deal. I can come to you if you flick on your microphone, but we have a great question for Miss Bally's class, our Central Peel Secondary School. What advice do you have for students studying STEM, particularly women who are hesitant to pursue engineering pathways? Great question.
This is such a good question. So historically, and we all know that sometimes STEM fields have historically been male dominated, but it is really rewarding to do STEM research. And it's not just for boys. And it can be hard at times. It really can be. But I think if it's something that you really do love, then the difficulties that come with pursuing a male-dominated field can be worth it if you do love it. So general advice I would say is to, one, generically, don't give up. There can be hardships and hard times that can be difficult to navigate through. But like I mentioned, that there are mentors that you can find along the way that will really help you. And I think personally for me, as a lady in STEM, one of the things that I really gravitated towards were finding mentors that really understood what that dynamic would look like. And so working with female scientists and female engineers to help you understand your path and anybody's path as well, it doesn't have to just be female, then it really helps along the way and helps that journey. So understanding, like gravitating toward those mentors, I think is just like so rewarding and helps with the path along the way.
I want to stress too, I mean, with the work that we do, about 65% of the people we bring on generally are women, but we spend the entire month of February, we kick out all the dudes, we do like 65 programs in the world. On our site right now, there's an event page for If Then, so we're currently in the midst of a 10-part broadcast series with like the greatest single women in STEM ambassador program of all time. So ifthenshecan.org is awesome. So if you're keen on like any kind of career path possible, I really can't encourage that enough. You too, Caitlin. It's really neat. It's very fun.
That sounds
great. But that's a great question. I'm so glad we led with that. So thank you very much, guys. Keep them coming in the chats. Mrs. Pascal's class, Dylan wants to know how far space is from the Earth, which is a neat question. I like that. We haven't had that in a while.
Oh man, you know, Dylan, I should know this answer, but I feel like Jesse's gonna know before me.
I love highlighting this. I love when we like stump the expert live. It's one of those questions. It's funny because I remember being a kid and that's all I thought it was, like biggest, fastest, strongest, longest, deepest, whatever. And it's not actually how most scientists or engineers go through their day. Like that's not your bread and butter way of thinking about things. Classically, it's about 60 miles to 100 kilometers is sort of our definition of where the atmosphere of the Earth ends. It's somewhere in that range, right? It depends on who you talk to for different definitions, but the International Space Station is not too far past that. So all the satellites we have, most of the satellites we have, the International Space Station, are all pretty close to the Earth. The moon is way further away than most of the things that we put into space. That is a really neat question. And at that point, there's no oxygen to breathe. There's nothing, missions just come through. So it's a totally different literally kind of place than the atmosphere where we fly in a plane is space. So I love that question.
Yeah, I also think it's important to highlight. I didn't know the answer to that, and that's okay. Like as a scientist and as an engineer, you don't have to know all the answers. It's great, and that's where we tap into friends and we say, "Hey, Jesse, like I bet you know the answer to this."
I like that it's so close too, because it reminds you, like at highway speed, 1 hour to get to space, which seems like way too close. Like it's crazy.
Yeah.
The atmosphere of the Earth is so tiny. If you like have an apple and you were to polish it, the polish on the apple is thicker than our atmosphere is compared to the Earth. So it's
Crazy.
really thin, the line between us and space. All right, so many questions. Mrs. Pascal, you guys rock. There's so many. But I'm going to have the Green Acres Academy first. How long did it take to make the spacecraft that's going to Jupiter's moon? So Europa Clipper, how long was that project?
Oh, it's a great question. Okay, so spacecraft themselves, they see what we call like a life cycle. So somebody a while ago, I believe it was about 13 to 15 years ago, proposed this mission. They said, hey, we really want to build this spacecraft. And then it has to go through a bunch of people getting approvals and funding. But ultimately, it was about a decade ago where they started to work on Europa Clipper. And then in earnest, it was probably about the last 7 years of really exhaustive hands-on creation of the spacecraft in order for us to be able to get it to a point where you could fly it. So the spacecraft is then built and then tested, and we verify a bunch of things on the ground, and then we integrate it into the rocket, and then it goes.
I love that we highlight this because when you're a student, your projects are like a week, a month. A huge project is like several months. In university, you might do like 6 month or 1 year projects. And to put a spacecraft into orbit takes decades sometimes. We have Abby Freeman on, who literally was a high school student when she went and watched Opportunity take off, like the rocket that was carrying the Opportunity rover to go to Mars. And as an adult, she finished all the rest of her schooling, and she ended up becoming the lead scientist on Opportunity. It was on Mars so long. So these are decades-long processes because these are multi-billion-dollar machines and missions to go explore other worlds. Like these are the cutting edge of science and engineering on planet Earth. You have to get it right. You can't spend that much money and have it go and fail the first moment it gets out there. So there's so many fail safes. There's so many things that they need to make sure work in the worst possible conditions, like a rocket launch, before they can send them up. And so the joy of that is you saw people screaming and yelling when Europa Clipper launched, but they've been doing this for a decade. Like it's so emotional. Imagine you're a football player and you win the Super Bowl. That's what it's like to be a NASA engineer and watch your spacecraft go into space finally. It's incredible. So I'm so glad we got that question.
Yeah, and I mean, I was only on Clipper for 10 months, helping the team get us to launch, and I was crying when we launched. Like I was sobbing.
As you should be. It's a very cool thing. I was pretty emotional just watching it. I've been hearing about it for 5 years. So, cool question, guys. All right, Georgia, you're asking a bazillion questions. I love it in the chat. Okay, let's go first. We're going to do everyone in order. So, Miss Max class. How many light years are we away from Pluto? And if you could explain what a light year is, I know it's another thing. I have a rough thing for you, but can you explain what a light year is, or just a distance in space in general for our students that might not have a conception of it?
Oh man, wow! You guys are asking great hard questions. This is so much fun. Okay, a light year. God, Jesse, you might have to correct me.
I can't help with this. So when you get into space, the distances are so big, and Caitlin, you harped on this a lot. Like it's really unfathomable for us here on Earth to think about how far distances are in space. And again, speed of a rifle bullet, 6 years to get to Europa almost. And so a light year is the distance light travels in a year. So our sun, we don't measure it really in like, oh, it's this many billion miles, but like it's just too far. So we say it's 8 light minutes to the sun. Going at the speed of light, which is like 300,000 kilometers a second, it takes 8 minutes for the light from our sun to get to us. Our next star over, the next closest star to our solar system is 4 light years away, which means that star emits some light. It takes 4 years for that light to get to us, which means that star could have blown up 2 years ago, and we won't know that for 2 years because the light is still coming to us to show us. It's really hard to wrap your head around, especially when you're younger. Like, it's just an unfathomable way of thinking about the world. So Pluto is not any light years away at all, because nothing in our solar system is light years away, but it's a very, very far distance. It's triple the distance of Jupiter. So we're getting into like really, really dark. To Pluto, the sun looks to Pluto like every other star in the night sky looks to us, is a cool way of thinking about it. Like, it looks like just a little dot of light in the distance. So it's very, very far. It took us decades, I think 20 years to get to Pluto when we sent our spacecraft to Pluto, New Horizons. So we just finally sent a spacecraft just to study Pluto a few years back. And that was equally fast, insanely fast, the fastest thing we've ever built. And it took like well over a decade to get to Pluto. So
and what's really cool is that we also measure how far or how long it takes us to communicate with spacecraft in light time. So Europa Clipper, for example, it's zooming along. Its trajectory, as we call it, is going, it leaves Earth, it does a fun orbit, but then it's actually going to come hang out by Mars, and it's going to use the gravity of Mars to slingshot itself back pretty far. It's going to actually come back to Earth then, use the same thing. It's going to take the gravity and use it to slingshot and then head all the way to Jupiter. And it's a maneuver that allows us to basically speed up the spacecraft. But as it's traveling this 1.8 billion mile trajectory, it's sending us data and we're able to communicate with it. And as it goes further and further, or maybe comes back to do these maneuvers, we say that it is a one-way or round trip light time. And so that's the way that we know how long the data is going to take to get us right? Because you can imagine if, let's say, we're all the way at Jupiter and Europa Clipper is sending us messages, we don't get those instantaneously like a text message. It takes some amount of time for those text messages essentially to come to us, and we measure that in light time.
I love it. We do this on Mars too. When we're driving the rover around, it's not zipping along like a car because we don't know what it could hit. And when we send a command to it, it takes time to get there. It's not instantaneous like flicking a switch. We send it, and like minutes later, the rover will go. And then we wait and see what happened. Send it a little again. Minutes later, the rover will go. And it's a really weird and counterintuitive way of thinking about the universe and scale of time. So, quick note, we've got more questions than we can possibly answer in the next 5 minutes. I love that you guys are so curious.
Love it.
Georgia, we're going to take as many as we can over the next couple minutes, and then we'll say a big farewell together. But write down those questions and email them to us at exploringbytheseatofyourpants, and we'll get you the answers. So Benjamin in Mrs. Norman's class wants to know if it's true that there are ice caps found on Mars. I know it's not your main area of expertise, but do we know about ice on Mars?
I know that there was evidence of ice on Mars, and we can investigate the geological changes of Mars based off of the signature patterns that we see in the soil. And so, yeah, we're still a little we're still investigating. We're still very excited about the potential of that being true and gospel, but it's really optimistic.
We've done a bunch of Mars programs, so if you want to check out our YouTube channel of some of the October shows, like literally like river deltas. Just like we have a river path on Earth, we have river paths on Mars. So Mars was a watery planet, and we're continually looking to explore and find resources and how we could tap that water, get ice, and beyond. So it's a really, really neat question. Thank you so much, guys. All right, YouTubers for a minute. There's so many of you. Okay, Alexis in Hamilton wants to know, when satellites send signals back to Earth, how do we know which signal is from which satellite when there are so many out there? Neat question.
Great question. Okay. So Europa Clipper communicates with something called the Deep Space Network, or the DSN. The DSN has 3 different stations across the world. There's one in Madrid. There's actually one out here in California. And then there's one in Canberra, I believe, is the 3rd one. And so we have global coverage when all of our spacecraft are trying to speak to us. But as they are speaking to us, every spacecraft has a unique identifier. And that unique identifier is a way that when that signal comes down to Earth and is captured by the DSN, they say like, hey, this unique identifier is with Clipper Therefore, we know it's Clipper trying to talk to us. So the data that's going to come in following will be from Clipper. So it's really cool because you can think of it like, it's almost like your phone number, where if you send a text message to somebody, it'll say like your phone number at the top and then the text message. So Clipper has essentially its phone number, it sends its text messages, and then we get to know what the data is.
We have never had that question in the history of exploring by the seat of your pants. So thank you so much for that. I want to note we've got so many distance questions from our Georgia classes in particular. I've just put a link in the chat for you for a really cool, like 5-minute video you should watch after this is done about the scale in the solar system. You'll love it. It's one of my favorite videos of all time. So check that out. And we're going to wrap up with a technical question because we don't get them very often. And it's very neat from Ms. Valley's class. They want to know, how much do electric fields and magnetism influence your research and design process as a material scientist designing spacecraft?
Oh my God, I love this question. What a great question. Okay, so, well, let's pick on Clipper for right now. Europa Clipper has 9 scientific instruments, right? So there's the body of the spacecraft that you can think of like the structure of a car. And inside the car are a radio and a speaker and the AC, you know, similar to a car. We don't have AC on spacecraft, let me be clear. But these 9 instruments are the instruments that are going to measure what's happening on Europa Clipper. With that is a magnetometer, which measures a magnetic field. There are also different signals for radars and all these different instruments. So basically, if the magnetic field of Europa Clipper, we need to be able to measure that magnetic field, which means that we don't want to have a bunch of magnetic-based materials that are also having a small magnetic field as well on the spacecraft itself, because we need to be able to make sure the magnetic field that we're measuring is in fact from the planet or the moon and not from the spacecraft or the materials on the spacecraft. So when we think about designing materials, we say, okay, like if we're trying to measure magnetic fields, we need to be really cognizant of the magnetic properties of those materials on board. Similarly with electric fields. So electric fields are also rather tricky, right? A lot of our electronics on board are generating currents and they have inherent electric fields associated with them. So we want to be able to make sure that they have longevity to be able to last this 6-year plus mission, but also make sure to not interfere with any of the other instruments to make sure that our signal is what we think it is. And that's a really hard design challenge to make sure that we know what materials we need.
Caitlin, that was fantastic. And we've never had that question. So Ms. Valley's class, that was awesome. Much appreciated. I put in the chat for you too, but I'll recommend to all students, if you're keen on material science, I love science books. Most material science books are really difficult and not at all interesting. The best one ever is called Stuff Matters by Mark Miodnik. And it's beautiful and it's amazing. And I can't recommend it enough. So if you're keen on that, send me a message and I'll tell you the details later. Dr. Caitlin, before we wrap up, this has been so much fun. We've got so many kids. Is there any last message you want to leave our classrooms today before we bring them in to say a big thank you and farewell?
Yes, space is so cool. We're doing so many cool things with space. So not just NASA too. I'm sure you guys have heard some amazing stuff that's coming out from Blue Origin and from SpaceX and all of the private companies and all around the world. So we're really excited. It really does feel like the golden age of space, and we get to learn so much and understand so much of our solar system. And I know it could be a hard path sometimes to really be nitty gritty with math and science, but it's absolutely worth it and a dream come true.
No better message than that. Caitlin, thank you so much for all of it. As always, stick around with me after we're done the broadcast, but I'm going to break the class and say thank you and farewell. If you're at home on YouTube and you want to yell and scream, great. Mrs. Pascal, you're one class on camera, so I'm going to bring you in to say farewell. Have a wonderful day, everybody. Bye for now, guys.
Bye, guys.